Joining us is former US National Security Advisor and former US Ambassador to the UN, Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, thanks again for joining us. Let me start with Iran. President Trump says that he supports Iranian protesters and the help is on the way. He has hinted at potential military options as well. At this stage, do you think that the US can really take military actions on Iran? And if yes, what kind of military actions do you think it will be? A Venezuela style regime change operation or full scale strikes? What could be the end goal, sir?
Well, I think Trump needs to decide what his goal is, and then you can think about the steps to take it forward. I think the regime is at the weakest point it's been since the revolution of 1979 for economic reasons, social reasons, ethnic reasons. Country's in deep trouble, and these demonstrations reflect it. I think the regime understands it's in deep trouble, and sadly, that's why they've been so brutal in their repression. I think that we should have been helping the opposition in Venezuela years before now, but and there's a lot we can do that doesn't involve military force, providing resources, enabling them to communicate within the country better, having stronger sanctions against Iran. But at the moment, I do think that the use of military force here can serve two objectives: one, to destroy or paralyze key assets of the regime that they're using to repress the people. And number two, to send a message to the people that the outside world, the US in particular, is doing what it can to help them. And in the midst of this bloodshed in the past couple of days, I think that's an important signal to the opposition. Trump needs to say this and explain it publicly after at least the first wave of attacks, so that people understand what we're doing. I do not think it needs to be at all U.S. boots on the ground. I think the kinds of targets that he should look at are Revolutionary Guard headquarters and military bases, the operating bases of the Basiji militia, which is the paramilitary organization really used against the civilian population, the nuclear weapons program, the ballistic missile program, that have nothing to do with the welfare of Iranian citizens. They're offensive weapons for the regime. It's a long target list, but to get started, those are some of the ones to consider.
Certainly, sir. So, do you believe the protests have reached a scale where the clerical regime in Iran is genuinely under threat? Or as the crackdown intensifies, are we likely to see the movement lose momentum?
Well, I think the regime is very fragile, and I think that's often the case with authoritarian governments. They look very powerful, but inside they're corrupt, they're weak, they've rotted out. I do think that the opposition should be looking for leaders in the conventional military and even in the Revolutionary Guards and among the Ayatollahs who might come over to the opposition side. I think the rank and file of the military and the Revolutionary Guard, they haven't benefited from the rule of this regime. The top generals and the Ayatollahs have benefited, but the rank and file have not. But they need some leaders who will stake their position out as being with the opposition. I think this day is coming for Iran sooner or later. The Ayatollah Khamenei is aging. He's not in good health. He's only the second supreme leader. So when he dies, the regime will be in trouble then. And I think we're very close to that moment. So this particular round of protests may not succeed, but it's coming again very soon.
Sir, if we talk about Starlink, Starlink has said that they are going to provide free services in Iran. And there are also reports that the Iranian authorities are hunting people down using Starlink to stop protest videos from going global. In situations like this, how important a role can technologies like satellite internet really play in supporting protests under heavy crackdowns?
Well, the Iranian authorities have taken down the internet. I think it's been down multiple days now, and without communication across the country, and it's a big country, obviously, the opposition can't coordinate its activities. So Starlink in particular, but as you say, any kind of satellite communications technology is the answer. There are news reports that the Ayatollahs are using military jammers, perhaps supplied by the Russians, but are also hunting down Starlink terminals house by house in some urban areas. So it begins to be actually dangerous to have a Starlink terminal in your home. This is the kind of thing that shows why additional help by the U.S. and other foreign powers to the opposition could be important, because cutting off communication from the regime's point of view is a very effective way of making sure that the opposition can't coordinate and therefore reduce the threat that they pose.
Right, sir. And if the US does move towards military action in Iran, could there be any direct repercussions for American bases across the Middle East? And when you factor in China, which has invested heavily in Iran, it buys its oil, backs Belt and Road projects, and even brokered Iran-Saudi deal, does this risk triggering a wider destabilization of the region?
Well, the Chinese certainly have an enormous interest in Iran, as they do in Venezuela, because of the oil in both cases. And I think the assessment in Washington is that the threats that the regime in Tehran has made about retaliation are real, so that American forces in the Gulf and perhaps elsewhere in the region, Israel, perhaps some of the friendly Arab countries, could be in trouble. That's obviously a risk, and it needs to be taken into account. But it, again, also shows, I think, the desperation of the regime. They're threatening on the one hand. They say they want negotiations on the other. You know, they're buying time. They're trying to find some way off of a path that looks like the U.S. is going to use force. They've seen what we did to their nuclear program. They're now very worried that more is coming. That is the kind of pressure on the regime that can also incentivize people in the Revolutionary Guard or the military to defect, to say, I'm not going to take the risk over here. I'm not saying they'll defect because they've suddenly become pro-democratic or something like that. They're going to defect because it's in their interest to do it. And by fragmenting the regime that way, you help bring it down.
Right, sir. And the US has threatened tariffs on countries that trade with Iran. Well, India is one of them, Iran's trading partner. Given that India is already facing 50% tariffs for buying Russian oil, what kind of impact do you think this could have on India-US relations?
Well, I think it's a terrible idea to add even more tariff burdens. I think this is just a Trump off the top of his head idea. Lufthansa from Germany has reinstituted flights into Iran, so we're going to put another 25% tariff on Germany too. Secondary tariffs are not the way to deal with the regime. It is in deep economic trouble. The sanctions on oil have produced a significant effect. 45 plus years of mismanagement by the Ayatollahs are what's really responsible. But we should be focused on, if the objective here is regime change, we and others should be focused on how best to make that happen as soon as possible at minimal cost to the people of Iran. And the tariffs, to me, are just irrelevant to that issue.
Certainly, sir. And if we move towards the topic of India-US trade deal, the US Commerce Secretary recently said that the trade deal didn't happen because Indian Prime Minister Modi did personally call Donald Trump. In your view, could this really be one of the reasons why the deal has remained in limbo? And is this the right way to deal with a country like India, the world's fourth largest economy?
Well, I don't know what Secretary Lutnick was talking about. I mean, leaders of countries are generally bigger people than saying, "Well, I'm going to wait for him to call me. I'm not going to call him." There's a lot at stake for both India and the United States in these trade talks. I think it's been a significant problem that we haven't been able to resolve the issues more quickly. And I think as important as trade is, and I certainly don't mean to minimize its importance, because it's critical for the well-being of our citizens. But we have important strategic issues in common here that we need to discuss. All major international economies have problems on trade. It just goes with the territory. The way to handle it is to work it out with continuing close consultation by the appropriate authorities, and leave the leaders free to look at the big picture. I think from the U.S. point of view, the whole tariff campaign that Trump undertook is a big mistake. I wish it would go away. Frankly, maybe the Supreme Court will make some of it go away. But this is it's been more harmful by a long shot than good for the U.S. And I think the impact on relations with India is a good case study of how the negative impact on trade really is dwarfed by the negative impact on the overall relationship.
Right, sir. And if we talk about Venezuela, after US military actions and the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, President Trump framed it as strength and even called himself the acting president of Venezuela. Does this set a dangerous precedent where regime change becomes less about international law and more about who Washington dislikes?
Well, I think we were fully justified in overthrowing the regime in Venezuela. We would have been in 2018 and 2019 after Maduro stole the 2018 Venezuelan presidential elections. In the US, many countries, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, recognize Juan Guaido as the legitimate president. In this case, Maduro stole the 2024 presidential election. And the opposition really is the legitimate government. And we worked with the opposition and had their approval to do this. So Maduro is not really government. He may hold the power de facto, but he's not legitimate. The trouble is, I don't think we've gone far enough. It's true that Maduro is in captivity in New York, but the Maduro regime, without him, but the regime is still in place in Caracas. And I think Trump's ideas of being able to produce a lot of oil from new investment in Venezuela are not going to come true, at least with American oil companies, because they will not invest significant amounts of money in a country without the rule of law. They're not. Several companies like Exxon have been expropriated twice by Venezuela, and they're not going to try a third time unless they're confident that that's not going to happen. So, in the case of Iran, Trump tweeted a couple of days ago to the patriots in Iran. He said, "Keep protesting, take over your institutions." Well, that's right. That's how you get rid of the Ayatollahs. That's what he should be telling the opposition in Venezuela to do, because I do think the hemisphere would be more peaceful, more stable if the Russian, Cuban, Chinese, and Iranian influence were expelled from Venezuela, and the people could take control of the government again.
Absolutely, sir. So, on similar lines, President Donald Trump has said that the United States needs Greenland for national security and that anything short of US control is unacceptable. He even suggested that NATO should help make that happen. From a security and alliance perspective, is this a realistic strategy, or does it risk undermining NATO unity and damaging US credibility with close allies like Denmark?
Yeah, I became an expert on Greenland back in 2019 after Trump first suggested the idea of buying the island back then. And so I had the National Security Council staff do a lot of research. It is accurate to say that Greenland is critical to US national security in the Arctic, as it is to Canada's national security and Denmark's and the entire NATO alliance, because of the increasing threat that Chinese and Russian activity in the Arctic as the polar ice cap melts make us more vulnerable. I've said some months ago that the Arctic is really Europe's soft underbelly now. It's not the Mediterranean anymore, it's the Arctic. So everybody, including the Greenlanders and including Denmark, have the same security interests at stake the US does. I think Trump's rhetoric about the use of military force is utterly unrealistic. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's very damaging to the United States when our friends and allies and people around the world hear us talking about using military force against Denmark, a treaty ally. It's very harmful. There's no upside. If anything, Trump's making it harder to accomplish what I think our legitimate interests are, with finding a solution here that will be good for the entire NATO alliance.
Right, sir. Just one last question. Finally, we have seen Trump administration moving closer to Pakistan. In your view, is this the right strategy for Washington? And does it risk making India anxious at a time when the US says it wants a stronger partnership with New Delhi?
Well, I think one thing that happened after 9/11 was that for the first time, I think the U.S. broke what people used to call the hyphenated relationship, that how we got along with India depended on how we got along with Pakistan, and vice versa. And I think that was an unsatisfactory situation for all three countries. I think the U.S.-India relationship is perhaps the most important strategic relationship we have in the 21st century. But dealing with Pakistan is not unimportant, and especially, in my view, because of the efforts of the Chinese to gain a stronger and stronger position in Pakistan with the Pakistani military. That concerns me greatly, as obviously it concerns India. So I think our interest, and we have other interests with Pakistan against the Taliban in Afghanistan and others. So I think if we can work with Pakistan and remind them of the threat that China poses to them as well as to India, that's a basis on which to proceed. I don't know that that's Trump's rationale, but if I were advising him, that's what I would tell him.